because one thing that we know about Nyaope users that is out there is that they steal from their mothers or their families. So they commit crime after looking for a fix, then they commit the crime. So obviously when you are a parent and you expect your child to come and steal from you, that to some extent causes some sort of fear. So we wanted to check anxiety and depression levels amongst family members.
Welcome to Let's Talk Science with Thuli, where we connect you, the people, to science. So generally, I host scientists and engineers, and they come through to my home, and we have very casual conversations about what research they're doing. And really, for me, the crux of it is, how does the research that they do affect me as a citizen, and how does it affect you? So I bring you the information that we generally are unable to get, because these people are doing research essentially to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. I'm very excited today because I'm hosting in my home a former colleague, actually. She's a former colleague when I used to be at the CSIR, Maphuti Madiga. Welcome to my home.
Thank you, Thuli.
Thank you so much for coming and driving all the way from the other city.
Yes. The capital.
From the capital,
yes.
No, yeah, we were at the economic center. You are coming to the money.
A goal.
So, tell me a bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Okay, my name is Maphuti, like she has already introduced me, and I'm from the north. I'm from Limpopo, a village called Nyaope. I am a sibling to 5 sisters and a brother, and yeah, I grew up in a settled environment. I went to school in the villages. We used to walk.
Nice.
We used to walk a long distance. It was fun at the time and safe, and safer than now. So yeah, it used to be very interesting when we were growing up. It was an interesting childhood.
We're gonna talk a little bit more about your childhood in our next segment, Beyond Science. But what is Nyaope?
So Nyaope became very popular in 2006. Around 2006, it emerged in townships such as Mamelodi, Rankuwa, Maskral, and it just spread out in the country like a mushrooming. So it's a cocktail drug, but the main ingredient is a low-grade heroin. It has dagga in it. It also has antiretrovirals and Ratex sometimes, bicarbonate of soda. So the other additives.
Bicarbonate of soda.
So the other additives are more dependent on where it is, and sometimes you find that dealers just want to make a quick buck, so they just mix anything that you can think of that has chemicals. So we still don't know the actual components of Nyaope.
And to be clear, Ratex kills rats.
Yes.
And ARVs are the antiretroviral drugs for HIV.
Yes.
When there are so many people that are actually struggling to get ARVs, there are people mixing cocktails.
Yes. So there was an outbreak of, I think even the nurses at hospitals and whatnot, at some point they were working with this drug lord where they were stealing the ARVs. Yes, there was shortage of ARVs at hospitals, not because they were running short out of them. It was because they were stolen, so that they can advance this business of Nyaope. Yeah.
Now, from your research, when a person is on Nyaope, what exactly happens to them?
So when you look at them, they have slow movements. You can see them, they're easy to identify.
Oh.
So it paralyzes most of their central nervous system.
What do you mean by central nervous system?
So what I mean is that they don't function.
I see.
Yeah, so you find them, they have slow movements, they can't speak properly, they are in another planet, they are dirty, they are always dirty.
Why is that?
I wonder. It's research that we are currently busy with. So I wanted to tell you that Nyaope in general in South Africa is not well researched. So moreover, the mental health of it on the actual users and the families. So it's quite a not well researched drug.
Because it's a fairly new phenomenon, right?
Yeah, but it has taken South Africa by storm. I mean, it's killing especially in the townships.
Really?
A lot of youth that are unemployed, we have seen that they use it. And I mean, like I'm saying, you can easily identify them. And taxi ranks, for example, you'll see them. They're, like I'm saying, they're slow movements, they're slow speech. So you can see that, and because of the cocktail in it, you can't really know what does what.
What
where.
does what?
So, yeah.
So there's probably like contradicting effects that, or like a mixture of effects from all of these different things that these people are taking,
Yes.
right? So you're now, because I know like you're like hardcore empirical scientist, right? Biochemistry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
But you've now moved over to public health.
Yes.
Why?
Well, I mean, I think I've always had a curious mind. I mean, the reason why I did my master's in science, I just always had a curious mind. I always wanted to know why, how. So when I did HIV research for the longest time, and then I did TB, a little bit of TB research, and I wanted to do like research management at some point. So I transitioned and went to the National Research Foundation, and while there, then I got an opportunity to study further. So I thought, why not? Why don't I do a research where I can interact with the communities, where I can do qualitative studies or quantitative studies, because that's something that I've never done. So part of the quantitative studies involve you interacting with the community. So public health is mainly about that, looking after the community. So the needs of the community. What are the pertinent diseases that we can solve, or we can come up with solutions. So solving problems, actually.
Solving problems, but working directly with the people.
Yes.
And not necessarily being confined to the lab, right?
Then we do statistical analysis so that we can understand the in-depth of the problem.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and then from a Nyaope perspective, what are you doing? What's the problem you're trying to solve?
So because Nyaope has been studied, so there are studies about the Nyaope users themselves that are out there now, but we don't necessarily know much about the families of the Nyaope users and their mental state, because one thing that we know about Nyaope users that is out there is that they steal from their mothers or their families. They commit crime after looking for a fix, then they commit the crime. So obviously when you are a parent and you expect your child to come and steal from you, that to some extent causes some sort of fear. So we wanted to check anxiety and depression levels amongst family members, whether sister, brother, so everybody who's staying with the Nyaope user. So that is the angle of my study, where I'm
Maphuti, Nyaope affects black people mostly. Mainly.
Yes. It's mainly in black communities, but concentration wise is in the townships. That's where we have seen a lot of users.
And I mean, you're talking about anxiety and mental health, and and these are black people, and I how do you gather this data? How do you get to a point? So, because I'm assuming the idea is you want to understand how having a Nyaope user in your home affects, because that's what you're saying, right? How it affects the family itself, and you're talking about how it affects them from a mental health and mental wealth perspective, right? So how do you conduct this research?
Okay, so my study is a mixed method. So I quantify the levels of anxiety and depression levels in this symptoms, in these family members, and after that then I speak to them to understand or to pick up what factors could be contributing to these high levels of anxiety and depression. It was a mixed study. That's why. So we started by screening them for prevalence of anxiety and depression levels.
And this is based on what we know to be the symptoms of anxiety and depression, where you're doing the screening. So you're screening them based on you're saying, I want to see if this person has anxiety,
Yes,
and I want to see if
yes,
this person has
yes,
depression.
Yes.
So you're looking at like the behavior of a person who has anxiety or the behavior of a person who has depression, right?
So the study it came across from undocumented data, where I mean it's just word of mouth that says I feel anxious when this person comes at home. So it's things that they have been saying that, but we never really quantified the level of that anxiety. So that's where the study came across, because a lot of studies that had been done on families was mainly qualitative, where you just speak to the parent, but we never really used like screening tools to actually measure the level of anxiety and depression symptoms in parents.
So what are the symptoms of anxiety and depression?
So far, remember, I'm still analyzing my data, but so far what we have picked up is that there's high levels of anxiety amongst family members, but particularly parents, followed by the sisters and brothers, so siblings. So that is the trend that we have seen so far, is that a lot of parents are more anxious as opposed to an aunt, for example. And what we have seen is that the depressive levels, the depressive symptoms are there, but they're not as massive as the anxiety levels. So,
because I think mental health is, and the reason why I was bringing up the fact that if Nyaope is prevalent in black communities, that's also the community that's not very well acquainted with mental health, but it's also the community that doesn't want to accept mental health. So where I'm going is, when I'm a Nyaope user and you're talking to my mom or interviewing my mom, what in my mom tells you she's anxious? Well, how is her? What are you looking for that says she's anxious? Are there a set of questions that you ask that lead you to say, oh, if a person is this, and this, then they're anxious and this is the level of anxiety, or it's this, and then that's the level of depression that they've got, right? So how do you guys go about sourcing that?
Okay, so we use international standardized screening tools called a generalized anxiety disorder tool. So it's like a questionnaire with 7 questions. In that question, we asked your feelings for the past 2 weeks. So then we score it. So it's a score between 0 and 4. So you tell us how you feel. So there's a set of questions like we'll ask you, in the past 2 weeks, how have you been feeling? Have you been watching TV? So those are the kind of questions in that questionnaire. Then we tick and have a score. So there's a classification of scores. So a certain score from 5 to, so it's classified according to the prevalence or the severity of that anxiety. So 0 to 4, for example, would be none. You don't have symptoms of anxiety. And then 15 to 21, it's severe anxiety symptoms. Remember, because we are not clinicians, we are not unable to diagnose. So what we are saying is, if somebody possesses those symptoms, then we recommend them to either contact SADC or the nearest clinic, so that they can make a proper diagnosis.
So should we be watching TV or shouldn't we be watching TV? What correlation?
So
is
remember,
that bad? Is it good?
No, what I'm saying is, we want to understand. Remember, depression is about your mood. It's about have you lost interest in the things that you've been doing. So that on its own will tell us whether you are now developing depressive symptoms or not. So if we ask you, in the past 2 weeks, have you been watching TV the normal way that you've been doing, or sleeping too much or sleeping less, or eating too much or eating less? So those are some of the questions that are there in the questionnaire. So if it's extreme, so we say, oh, maybe half the time I don't watch TV, or I've lost interest in doing the things that I normally do. So that is a measure of us saying you could be having the depressive symptoms.
Yes. And then how many people, how many families are you interviewing?
So I have interviewed 390 families.
Yeah.
No, sorry, 390 participants.
Yo.
So from each family,
that's a lot.
It is. It was quite an intensive study, and I struggled a bit because of COVID. So I had to, so we had to employ research assistants for them to help me. So we had nine townships that I did the research on in Tshwane. So my study was particularly in Tshwane. Like I said in the beginning, that Nyaope was mainly popular in those
townships. Yeah. Was it difficult to get participants?
It was completely difficult because with Nyaope users, it's easy to spot them on the streets, taxi lines,
so they're easy to find.
So, but with families, how would you know? Because the Nyaope users are out there. So it was not easy to conduct the studies. So what our approach was, that we approach drug rehabilitation centers where they deal with the Nyaope users. So the Nyaope user, the centers were able to direct us to families that have. So obviously that comes with challenges, because then people have stigma. There's stigma around Nyaope use in the townships. People don't want to be associated with Nyaope users. So some families
because you know, my TV went missing. Yeah. It must have been your son.
Yes. So some people were hesitant to talk to us, but generally there's just stigma around drugs. So even with treatment, it's not easy.
How do people get treated? Like that's where I want us to go now, is to say, when you have found the data and like you're saying, like a lot of what you guys are finding is that people are anxious. What must happen next? What's the point of the study? Are we just going on a fact-finding mission, or is there like what is the follow-on? What are we hoping to achieve with the study?
My study is like a baseline study.
Yeah.
We are hoping that with the findings that we're going to get, then we can be able to get to another point where we are coming up with interventions that we can get the parents or the families that are struggling. Because one of the things that they encourage, I mean, with drug abuse generally, substance abuse, is that there's AA, there's people go to rehab centers and whatnot. But it's mainly for the users. So we want something that...
That is so true. The effects of drug users generally are such that the interventions are for the drug user themselves and not
for the family and the people that look after them. Because even reintegration is a problem. Somebody goes to a rehab center, they come back to the same similar situations. So reintegration becomes a problem, they go back, they relapse. So we want to find solutions around that, how to equip the parents or the family to deal with this kind of situation. So it's a baseline study that we are hoping in future it can influence policy making. We can do more studies where we look into what kind of support do these parents need actually. What are the issues? Because it's not easy to come out with an intervention when you don't know how deep is the issue. So this study will make us to come up with that.
To understand that better. I think it's such an important study because it's looking at the blind spots. I mean, I don't know about you out there that's listening or that's watching, whether or not you've ever thought about, well, there's the drug user and we're trying to get the drug user to stop using drugs. And we're trying to find out why they're using drugs. And the focus is on the drug user themselves. But the blind spot is always the support system or the people that associate or relate with this person. And I don't think that I've never thought about that person. For me, they're a complete blind spot to think about how they are doing, because we always also say, oh, the thunder is lovely outside. But I think what we always say is that drug users need to have, and we see this all the time when we're watching things about drug users or like addicts, and we'll say, oh, you need to have such an incredible support system. But nobody ever looks at that support system, whether or not that support system needs support in itself. Oh, okay. I think that was very enlightening, particularly for me, as I've just explained to you now, that for me it's the blind spots, and I think it's such important research. I think as scientists and empirical scientists, we often forget about the social sciences or public health, as it were, that where people really work with the people that are on the ground, that are really affected by the challenges that they're trying to solve. And I think for me, this has highlighted the importance of questioning and the importance of research, because a lot of the time there's so many blind spots in the research that we do, the research we conduct, and I think this is an example of how we need to widen how we look at things a little bit, so that it's all encompassing, so that the solutions that are developed are also all encompassing. That's the end of our Let's Talk Science with Thuli segment. We're going to be back after this with Maphuti to speak about everything that she does beyond science.